alone, if it's something that you need to know more about it, or for something that is not clear in your awareness, don't hesitate, because whenever you seemingly ask a question, it helps, because I stop for a moment, and then everybody gets to figure it out if we are all on the same page or not necessary, and everybody has time to really get into it. So anyway, today we're going to go through the first triad, because last time that's what was going to happen, but we spent all the time in the introduction about the new consciousness itself. That's what we did last time. So of course, as I wrote you, the 10 dimensions, the way that we're going to see them now, or we're going to be with them now, or we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about it from the perspective of the whole new consciousness. We are not going to talk from the perspective of the linear consciousness.
Cristian, I'm sorry, I muted you by accident. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, I mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay.
I muted everybody by accident, and I shouldn't have muted.
All right, it's okay. Lois have appeared. How are you, Lois? It's so lovely to see you. So anyway,
Ellen, would you give me permission to record?
Oh, definitely. Yes, absolutely. Start recording. So I started again. So tell me when we are ready, then we start. Okay, are we good? All right, so as I was saying, you have all the time in the world to really raise your hand and ask questions as I go along. I said to you that the last time I was planning to do what I'm doing when I do today, which is the first triad of consciousness, of the first 3 dimensions of the 10 dimensions. But now what I was telling you is, until now, we have spent a lot of time explaining a little bit what they are, doing explanations about everything. And now we will do a little bit, but mostly it's going to be from the perspective of the new consciousness. So the 10 dimensions doesn't exist inside of the realms of duality. They are absolute. They are the consciousness, the new consciousness, and they are the consciousness of unity that exists in the background of whole universal existence and whole earthly existence. And it's the consciousness that always have existed from the beginning of time, and then we have reconnected to when, in the moment of the harmonic convergence, came into existence in 1986. So from now, so then I'm going to go into the 10 dimensions from the perspective, I'm going to go into the first 3 dimensions from the perspective of the 10 dimensions already. Means unity within unity, wholeness within wholeness. As I told you before, this is Carolina. Hi, Carolina. As I told you before, the 10 dimensions are individualistically whole. They are individual and whole at the same time. And there are 10 simultaneous expressions of unity, expressing the unity of life. 10 simultaneous. What simultaneous means that they all occur at the same time. They are not linear. They are not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is the way we understand them, because the linear mind that we have evolved as humans. But in reality, that occurs within the natural moment, which is now, because of the new consciousness, is the moment of life. Synchronicity, what we talked about last time. Synchronicity, simultaneity, synergy, tensegrity, the metrics of balance, the natural moment of life. Each of the dimensions are atomic as a unit. They are before awareness. But out of the grace of having been in the entire process of evolutionary mind from the past, we can understand it now from the perspective of the linear mind. So this is the first time that the linear mind can fully comprehend wholeness, because it just happens that we are inside of wholeness for the first time, and we are from wholeness that we can understand linear, and from linear we can understand wholeness. It will be the same as saying, from quantum mechanics, we can understand the nature of the other aspect of physics. There is actually the synchronicity, the new synchronicity that we call in physics entanglement. And from quantum entanglement, we can understand quantum mechanics and so forth. We are inside of the whole system of consciousness. So returning again, they are simultaneous, they are synchronized as one. In each of the dimensions are individualistically whole because they are an integral part, a unit that is an integral part of the 10. So each of them contains within themselves the other 10. So what that means is that as we become more familiar with the 10 dimensions, you begin to understand that the whole explanation of each of the dimensions exists in the totality of the 10. And the totality of the 10 is singularly experienced through the one that we're talking about. So in other form, the first dimension, which is crown, can be fully, completely understood through the second, third, fourth, through all of the 9, because that's the whole explanation of the first one. But once we begin to understand that, we also begin to understand that each part of it, each dimension, is whole in its nature because it self-contains the individuality of each of them, and each individual part self-contains the whole meaning of the 10. So when you begin to contemplate them, they are wonderful, and you will understand them more through the graphics today, how the contemplation of the synchronicity between the individual dimension and the 10 dimensions creates a synergy and of the mind, that then the mind makes sense of things inside of a whole spectrum of knowledge, instead of the mind making sense of something from the linear perspective of the mind that we have inherited. Because from the linear perspective, the mind trying to figure it out, okay, well, this and that, and this and that, and this and that. And what we're learning now, that the mind is operating in the realm of wholeness, and from the realm of wholeness, understand what we call awareness before as being the actual picture of that which we see. So it's no longer linear. It is synchronized. It is completely different in that nature. It's a whole new mind that we have access to it. They self-contain within themselves the entire fulfillment of our human experience. It's a lot, because in the linear process, we were trying to figure it out what the mind was about and what do we do and blah, blah, blah. And we didn't have a full scenario. So it was very difficult because it created constantly points of reference that confuses, sometimes clarifies us, but sometimes confuses us. The new mind never confuses us. It's always perfect. And once we begin to understand it, we can exist and live in the field of a new field of knowledge. It's called eternal knowledge because it exists inside of eternal principles. It's not linear knowledge like the wisdom of time. It's the wisdom of eternal existence, which is universal in its nature because it encompasses all the intelligence that is the universe, plus the intelligence that we have developed through our human experience. So we are in a whole field of consciousness that is 100% intelligent. And I would like to go for the first one. The first 3 are crown, consciousness, and unity. Now, crown, as I said, the full understanding of crown is self-contained in the other 9, of course, but also in crown as an individual experience. And I would like to tell you that the reason that we call it crown, because it is allegoric. It represents many things, and I would like to tell you what they are. And now, I don't think that we ever talk about it in the classes. What crown represents is the union of all things for the first time as one kingdom, the universal kingdom of life. And the reason that we use crown, because through the history or our evolutionary nature, there were many, many, many kingdoms that came, flourish, and decay, and disappear in the planet. Remember all the crusades, all the different stages of civilizations that got a peak civilization and then innocently went under. And in the memory of our human existence, we have stories and myths like Atlantic, and many places that went under and went under the sea. And then we have like Egyptian civilization and the Greek civilization and the Roman civilization. And for the first time, we are in a new civilization, but the civilization that we have at this time is fantastic because it will never decay. It will never undo itself, because for the first time, it exists inside of the realms of unity. Every civilization innocently went under, because even though unity was an exalted form in which it was created, it couldn't be maintained because the consciousness, being linear, could not support the continuity of the consciousness as it corresponds to the moment of life. Another form of saying the idealism or all aspects of consciousness were taken externally from the moment. So the moment was always an evolutionary nature of our own unfolding, and most of the time very difficult and very complex, as opposed with the reality of the consciousness itself, that as a background was always perfect. So what crown means the kingdom of all kingdoms. You can call it heaven and earth. We can call it the kingdom. Sometimes in the beginning we used to call it the kingdom of love, especially because crown represents the moment of vertical union that is actually the fountain of life. When we learn in Unity in Motion, we learn how to define the 10 dimensions. And the first dimension, skeletal-wise, it becomes crown, the highest vertical connection within our being. And the highest vertical connection within our being is actually the natural center of gravity and the center of expansion. So it is inside of the sphere of life. So it's not that we are extending ourselves up, it's that we're coming into corresponding with the principle that centralizes. And then as we begin to match that principle, we have dimensions of awareness, relationship, experiences, all inside of our own energy, inside of the field of energy. So the movements of Unity in Motion are different because they are not exercises, are movements from which we acquire synchronicity by reconnecting all directions of our being mind, energy, and physical structure, in order to synchronize with an ever-present principle that is called balance. That is not just our balance, it's our communion with the balance. That is the motion of life, what is the motion of the solar system, what is the motion of the universe, and what is now the fountain of life. Because when we reconnected in 1986 with a new consciousness, we became also for the first time to have access to the actual moment that is all synchronized in existence. And this natural moment is actually movement. It's the fountain itself. So that's the reason in Unity in Motion, the first section is called the fountain of life. And the movements are always for the fountain of life, because the fountain of life is actually the moment of your feeling of self, ultimately. The way I feel myself is the fountain of life. That's what I will discover through the practice and through the comprehension and the communion with the new consciousness. I live the fountain of life. That is a fantastic thing, because what that is really actually health. Life is absolute health, because it's constantly recreated itself anew and it's always whole. But it has to be, in us, it's a form of integration that it becomes our natural state. It's not something that we said, okay, now I'm going to be inside of the fountain of life, because you already are. So, and what we're doing, we're coming into correspondence more and more and more with the natural sensation of our being. And as we coming into corresponding with the natural sensation of our being, we discover that we are inside of the fountain of life. And then when you discover that you're a fountain of life, and your mind comprehend what that means, and you begin to have the natural sensation of love, which is energy. We are love itself. When we begin to have the conceptual understanding what that is, and when we begin to have the physical experience of what that is, it becomes permanent, because we are becoming, or we really realize that we are the very thing that is life itself. So when that happens, it's extraordinary, because life disappears, as I said before, as an objectification outside of ourselves. So once we are connected to life all the time, we are always perfect, because what life means is that every single moment is 100% energetic, 100% intelligent, and 100% physical. It's the moment of life, not the relative moment of my experience. It's the moment of life in which the relative moment of my experience naturally began to be understood and experienced as the natural moment that I call myself. Because I live life, so I am the moment of life. So I becoming more and more in the understanding, the experience, and the feeling of what that is. So returning to crown then is a universal celebration, because it is the union of what we call universe. Is a human universe, because we are in the presence of the kingdom, which is that which we always have been searching for. From all the beginning of time, we're trying to get into the kingdom. Some people are calling the kingdom of heaven and earth. So the first is universal, is human, but it's also in the third entity, which is yourself. You are the kingdom as well, which means that you are, in each of us, is existing in life as the creation, manifestation, and experience of the new world. We are experiencing it, we are receiving it, and we are creating at the same time, because for the first time, we are not relative in relation to creation. We are one with creation itself. So it's a fantastic, fantastic thing once the mind begins to have a glance of it, because you're going to say, oh, I see. I am the creator of the new world for the first time. Before, I always thought, okay, the new world will come, such and such a time, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like a participant of it. Now it's not true. Since I am synchronized, I am the creator as well. The beauty of it, that you will always be creating the new world perfect, because yourself is perfect. You will never create anything in the world that is not perfect, because the new consciousness doesn't operate in duality. So what that means, that it's impossible for you to create any action that is not absolutely 100% perfect. It's a natural thing. You don't have to think about it, because if you think about it, you're going to get stuck in the idea of right and wrong and maybe good, I have to do this and that. But when you begin to understand the reality of the totality of the consciousness, which is you, and you begin to understand that, for the first time, you become free from any guilt. You are without guilt, because you can never do anything wrong. It is your nature to be loved. It's your nature to be intelligent. It's your nature to be energetic. It's your nature to be present. It's your nature to be helpful. It is nature to be empowering. It is helpful to create the new world, which is beautiful for all of us, for the whole of humanity. Because when you create a new world as yourself, you're creating it for everybody, because you are partaking that the consciousness that embraces all things as one is atomic. It's not linear in relation to behavior, or how much intelligence you have, or how much money you have, or what culture you're coming from, or what religion you have. This is not. Every single human being, it is the image and the likeness of light, because that the essence of the human being is. So consciousness, as it relates to crown, represents the universal connection to the intelligence that is crown. And we'll get to know more about it when we understand the 10 dimensions, because the 10 dimensions represent the whole spectrum of the understanding of what crown means. Just as the 10 dimensions represent the whole understanding of what consciousness means, and the whole understanding of what unity, which is the spirit, means. That's the first trinity. Yes. So Crown represents, in our human sense, our connection to our innate whole intelligence. That you are inside of a field that is 100% intelligent. That's a lot to say, because in the story of our humanity, because of personality and complexities, we always thought, okay, I'm a little bit intelligent, but I'm not. I'm a little bit this and I'm that. Einstein tell me I'm 10% in relation to 100%, but I don't know that in my mind, blah, blah, blah. So all this have to disappear, because in reality, your mind is 100%. Now, what that means is that you are open to a field that is 100%, and gradually becomes more and more connected to it. Because if you were to be 100% right now, we may have to put you in the madhouse, directly taking you to the madhouse. Because 100% will mean that you will not be able to understand anything you see, because it will be too much information. But the information that you're receiving in the new consciousness is not linear in relation that you get in a percentage. It's linear in the, if you want to put it that way, in relation that you get what you are naturally can really withstand. And what I mean withstand is mean the degree of energy, love, and experience, because the new consciousness is 100% benign. And then I will tell you a little bit later about it through the divine, as we talked before. It allows us to really, each of us to have our own degree, our own degree of integration. So then we don't end up in halfway houses or in the madhouse or in another state of too much, yeah? Especially when you understand that all the drugs that ever were created in the linear consciousness that exists simultaneously as the full awareness of consciousness without the drug is actually the actual nature of our mind. So we have access to everything. So what that means is that you are the self-containment of the vessel, and you determine in what direction the vessel can really connect to you. If you depends, it's up to you. Now, so returning to crown has three connotations in our human. To be in the kingdom of heaven for the first time, in the kingdom of heaven is nothing other than the synchronicity with the universe, in which the mind is fully present with the wholeness of its being. Yeah, when Christ came into the planet and was talking about the kingdom of heaven, what he was talking about was not a place in the clouds where there are palaces that we go and hang out. What he was talking about is a natural intelligence within our being that in that time, can you imagine 2,000 years ago or more, would have been impossible, because that's the reason that Christ, when all those, in that time, the teachers was teaching in terms of parables, because people could not understand anything. Can you imagine somebody start talking about the intelligence of the consciousness 100%? Nobody will know what the world are you talking about, especially because in that time, no matter how evolved we were very, very simplistic, because we were still surviving in a very difficult environment, because we didn't live very long. And the poor people, when we were poor, we couldn't really survive very much in nature. Nature was complex and difficult because we didn't have what we have right now. No hot water, no bathroom, no sterilization, no nothing. So it's good for us to remember where we're coming from and all the different stages that brought us into it. So in our humanity, kingdom, crown, means the kingdom that connects us to the planet Earth, the kingdom that connects us as human with the totality of our intelligence, with the totality of our love, and the totality of the presence that is the universe. You are the kingdom manifesting the new world, because you are in synchronicity with all things. Yeah, you are not 1 degree separated from the synchronicity. Yeah, this is important to really spend time a little bit about it and contemplation, because the personality within ourselves, what we call personality and what we call ourselves in the past, was really actually a contraction from the wholeness. In the past, they used to call the ego. And the contraction from the wholeness can never think, no, I'm just me, this is what I do, this is what I want, this is blah, 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 because we base our sense of self in our contraction. And now our sense of self has become our expansional communion with all things. So the ego, what we used to call the ego, becomes actually the fulfillment of the self. And the fulfillment of the self embraced the ego completely. And the ego melted in ourselves, melted inside of our mind, in our heart, inside of our body. And it becomes the actual expression of the individuality that encompasses all things, not the individuality they contract in relation to all things. Yeah. So that's the kingdom. Now, the third aspect of crown means light. Remember that I give you a paper that I was going to read it to you today, but I decided not to. The paper that I give you about there is no sight without light. And that paper, if you have it, or if somebody doesn't have it, please give it to, because it's something to spend time with it. Because in that paper, in the paper of physics, physics.com, explain how light is actually the nature. The only way that we can see light is through physical form. Light is a reflection of light upon physical form. You will not be able to see the sun without the planet to be able to reflect the light and create the sky that we see. So with that understanding, we'll begin to understand that the entire physical formation that we call physical formation is one with light, because without physical formation, you cannot see the light, and you cannot see the light without physical formation. Without physical formation, you cannot see the light, and without the light, you cannot have the life that is the physical formation. So in reality, we are the light of the world, naturally, by the nature of physics. Yeah, but sometimes it gets interpreted when we use the word the light of the world to be a religious statement. And the reason that it was created to be a statement is because when a being begins to understand that it's the light of the world, you begin to understand that you are the creator of everything, and you love everything, and you are everything, and you begin to really be in the presence of your natural self, which in that time, in the past, have been interpreted as being a master, or being like a very enlightened being, and so forth. But all those things now have become the natural experience of our human life. It's a lot to really go into, because before we categorize it, the masters and everything, and now we are the consciousness that is the master, and even a little bit more than the master, if you allow me to say. Because the master, when Christ was here, he was living his physical experience at the same time that he was living his divine experience. So he was reconciling many aspects of his conscious self at the same time that it was manifesting his desire with union with God. Yeah, as the story tells, that one of the last stages of Christ living in the planet was that it was given the option before the crucifixion that if we were to renounce what he was calling his Father, or his God, or his consciousness, he will be okay, that he would not have to kill him. So in that time, Justice said, no, I can't do that now, because my function was to break loose from that reality that I'm not connected to life itself, or the Father, to fulfill its essence. And without sounding religious to you, the fulfillment of this essence came in the moment of crucifixion. Remember the whole story. Oh, Father, why you have forsaken me? At the last moment of death. Oh, Father, what have you forsaken me? The next, oh, Father, forgive them, because they do not know what they do. So the whole what it will be, the whole transcendence that Christ, if you may, brought to our human existence, was that he united the Trinity of the human not knowing, of the human really actually receiving the knowing, and then forgiving everything, because he understood that everything was like a play, that it was being played for the freedom of the consciousness itself. So in that sense, the masters in the past could not live the moment of Christ, could not live the kingdom of heaven here. That's the reason it was the kingdom of heaven will come, because in that time, the kingdom of heaven was not available as a continuity of existence. Nothing that is not continual is real. Yeah, nothing that is not continual is real, because the only reality there is ever present and therefore continual. That's the movement of unity in motion. Continuity is the only connection to existence, because that's what existence is. So the ups and the downs of consciousness are real only in the perspective and time that they were pursuing the understanding and final experience of unity. In the final experience of unity, we are constantly connected to it. Yes. So the first dimension, crown, is actually the light of the world, the intelligence of the world, the connection with universal existence, the connection of self-equilibrium, if we want it physically, to the universal equilibrium, the zero-point balance in which you initiate the form, and then the communion of the movements of the form with the sphere of life in 3 dimensions, because crown is the fulfillment of 3 dimensions. We are 3-dimensional beings created in the field of 3 dimensions. From the amoeba to the moment in which I'm talking to you. We are the 3-dimensional universe, a 3-dimensional form, a 3-dimensional body, a 3-dimensional mind, a 3-dimensional heart, a 3-dimensional experience. All there is 3 dimensions. And the 10 dimensions following the 4th dimension is the fulfillment of 3 dimensions. And then the 10 dimensions is the entire understanding of the perfection existing in 3 dimensions. So I said it right again. The 10 dimensions doesn't continue from 3 dimensions. It's going to be more. No. 3 dimensions is all there is. The Trinity of life, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, or light, consciousness, and unity, or the 6 directions of space, front and back, right and left, and whatever we want to call it, the sphere of life. So the 3 dimensions is actually the reality of life. You cannot go farther, you cannot go lower. It's all there is. But the 10 dimensions, starting with the 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10, is the whole comprehension of the perfection existing in the 3 dimensions, the fulfillment of it. Yeah. So again, so then let me see where we are. So far, so good. Are we okay? I'm doing good on time and everything. Any questions about it, Elena? You have questions? No. Okay. So we know a little bit about it. Every time you go to crown, it means that you get to align the seven centers. Then you get to be in the center of the sphere of life. And I think you're understanding now that the sphere of life is an ever-present existence that is constant in our lives. And when we know how to connect to it, we are inside of unity constantly. Yeah? Somebody had a question?
Yeah, Christian,
Yeah,
I have a question. So when I think of the dimensions, right, and I think that they're synchronized with each other,
yes.
the vision I get in my brain is
Yes.
a beam of light, right, going through a prism. And you see all the colors and it's all there. It's all synchronized. It's all together. It's all instantaneous, right?
Yes,
But
exactly.
it's separate but together. So that's how I vision it. I mean, I guess I'm a visionary learner and that's how I perceive it.
Yes, and you're perfectly right. It's separate and together. The separate is the part in which your mind can comprehend things. The together is the mind that you are. So one is what it is, and the other one is how you comprehend it.
I was going to say the understanding.
Yeah, the understanding is a comprehension. Yeah, that's the way that the voyage of evolution, when it started, even though it was the most hazardous voyage, because we have to start from nothing and develop the whole mind of consciousness. At the time that the consciousness reunited with the wholeness of unity, it had the whole scenario of linear comprehensions that for the first time can fully comprehend unity. Because unity without the separation is meaningless. It doesn't have existence. Yeah. We have to be separated from something in order to understand the wholeness. We were in the wholeness when we were in the Garden of Eden, where I will tell you a little bit right now, a little bit more.
So,
So
so
let
then we
yeah.
have continuous continuity because it's never separated. It's
Never
always,
separated, living in the innocent illusion that we were always separated.
okay.
And the illusion was nothing other than the development of all the different components that finally could allow us to understand unity from the separation. Therefore, unity can comprehend all forms of separation, and all forms of separation can exist for the first time inside of unity. So we completed the voyage. But the voyage was hard, but also divine, because it allowed us for us to be able for the first time to have all the pieces of the puzzle. There's no one piece of the puzzle that is lost. I will show you a little bit later what the pieces of the puzzle mean.
So,
Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so when I think of, then we come to unity, with that unity, we can all live in harmony.
Yes, yes, it's lovely. It's a lovely explanation of, with unity, we can all live in harmony. That's the explanation of unity. Unity and the frame itself is all harmony already. Yeah. So yes, we will all live in the kingdom when we are becoming more and more and more present that we're living in the kingdom. That's where we live. We live in harmony. But we will be free from the idea that we have to create the harmony.
Okay, okay.
Because if we're
that
trying
helps.
to create the harmony, we will create a lot of craziness. Because
So-
harmony is already the existence of life itself. Yes, that's the difference. That's the reason that evolution takes such a long time, because through the process of differentiation, we created more and more and more and more, and always inside of the differentiation, and we were not ready yet to be inside of the whole spectrum. So we created every single piece of the puzzle to come into the moment of union. So finally we are here.
So
Yes?
really, we don't have to work at it because it's already here.
Exactly, exactly. The only thing, if it's only one thing that we have to do, is to recognize naturally, because you can't do it through a belief, recognize that you are the very thing, that you are present with that consciousness, and open yourself to it. Is the word open, be willing to really receive it, be in the field itself. And then inside of the field, you will get all the understanding that corresponding to the field, because the field is already perfect inside of its consciousness. It is light, it is consciousness reunited, it is unity, it is presence, it is balance, it is beauty, it is self, it is nature, it is eternal because it's infinite regeneration. It is the foundation that connects you to paradise, which is the center of the universe, from which you are partaking of the entire field that we call the fountain of life. The moment of existence. Yeah. Okay. So now, before we continue, we want to leave it. I want to leave the dimension of light, which is ground, and go to the dimension of consciousness. And I would like to explain something to you that hopefully would not be complex, because it could be complex, but I would like to make it simple. Because of the story of the consciousness, from the story of Genesis, or from the story of the consciousness inside of the Darwinian theory, we have to evolve. In the Darwinian theory, we evolve from the species. And from the species, we allow ourselves to become, from the four-legged creature to the two-legged creature, to the development of the mind, to the development of the opening of the brain and developing of consciousness or intelligence, to the degree that we have manifested our humanity to extraordinary degrees of brilliancy, if you may. Because of the story we have in evolution, there were brilliant philosophers and teachers and masters and beings and saints. Everything that we have called, it was an evolutionary stage of the mind trying to match the inner sense of its own being, the inner sense of its own intelligence. So that was the Darwinian development of consciousness. But also we have the Genesis idea. And the Genesis idea that some of us carry within ourselves is that we were created perfect from the beginning. That we were a holographic imprint of the image and the likeness of God. And we live in the garden. And then when we live in the garden, we have a remembrance in ourselves in which life was exquisitely beautiful. It was exquisitely present because all energetic. And everything that we wanted was in front of us. We didn't have any desire. Everything was already given. The best analogy is when you enter a garden that is being well taken care, and it's perfect and beautiful and watered, and all the flowers are perfect and everything is perfect. Oh my God, everything is so beautiful, so alive, you know, so perfect. So that's the memory that we carry, most of us, everyone, but most of us have gone so many times under and coming back again in the sense of reproducing as human. And sometimes we, in our lives and the reproductions of humans, we were more physical, which we mean more structurally, from the perspective of Darwinian, from more, in other times, more from the perspective of Genesis, which carried the memory of the Garden of Eden within ourselves, the original perfect place in your heart, in which everything is love, beautiful, and consciousness. Yes. So in the Genesis, we have the story that we were separated ourselves from the garden. And when we separated ourselves from the garden, we entered the realms of good and evil. That means that the tree of life, which is the structural formation of the physical body, got disconnected inside of its duality. And we entered the realms of good and evil in order to recover through our own personal experience all the components that corresponded to the garden in order to return, but this time in full knowledge. Because when we were in the garden, we didn't have knowledge, we didn't have a mind. So the entire history of evolution from the perspective of the separation from the garden, or from the perspective of the Darwinian theory of the species, was the evolutionary nature of the mind creating the whole scenario that we call our world. So that's what we did. The linear mind manifested itself inside of all the possibilities of duality. And it was extraordinary because at the same time that it was manifesting dualities, and many times in our existence, we have glances of unity. We call it samadhi, or we call it some particular idea. So we created a religion. All religions was created by a person that had 1 moment, 1 hour of time in which was connected to the actual field that was the field of unity. And then Christianity was created, Judaism was created as the reality of the Messiah. The idea of Buddhism was created as the Dharma of existence. The idea of Islam, the reflection of light, you know, Allah was created. Krishna was inside of the God. All those were stories created from beings, human beings, that have glances of the perfect existence of the cosmos and the perfect experience of unity. And then the religions created all these extraordinary followers that inside of the story could not yet comprehend or be inside of that experience. Because even the master didn't have that experience continuously. I think I told you that Buddha died and sick by food that somebody gave them and so forth. And it was a lot of suffering because he was teaching continuously. All the masters in that time, they didn't live in the kingdom of heaven. They live in the kingdom of humans. And the kingdom of human was quite difficult, yes? Because in that time, the human existence could not live in the kingdom of heaven yet. It existed in some projection of the mind. It didn't exist within the present moment. Yes, so that's the difference of it. So consciousness, when it became separated from the garden in the Genesis, or became the voyage of evolution, began to manifest the mind. And then we call it the mind because each human being have its own interpretation of the mind. What we call individuality was an interpretation of the mind itself. And it created a lot of complexity, because can you imagine millions and millions of human beings living at the same moment created another reality? So it had been very complex, this history of evolution, because every story, every idea, every dualistic principle, we always felt they were talking about the same thing, but we were not. So each being was independently oriented inside of the field of mind. So the field of mind becomes complex because we didn't know what is the difference between mind and consciousness. The difference between mind and consciousness is all there is. It's the permeating nature of the reality of unity, the immanent reality, what we call the new consciousness. Mind was the individual and collective process in which we all human beings set about to discover all the components that eventually was going to bring us back into the garden. Either to be, the garden means that the mind of Darwinian is much more than 8 or 10, but it's have access to the whole, or even that the mind becomes finally connected to the garden, to the original garden, the kingdom of heaven. Remember Christ said the kingdom of heaven is at hand? At that time, the reason he says the kingdom of heaven is at hand, because it wasn't present. It was in another dimension, therefore which we have to go to it, die and go through it. Now, the second coming is that the kingdom of heaven is actually you. The kingdom of heaven is ever present. We are the kingdom. It's the release of the mind from the perspective of separation. Once you release from the perspective of separation, you are the kingdom of heaven, because you are simultaneous with universal creation. Simultaneous with universal creation. This is very important. Simultaneous means there is not one frame of separation from the totality of the universe manifesting as one now. Simultaneous means there is not one frame of separation from the totality of the universe manifesting itself now. So we are inside of the field of existence that exists before awareness. Yes? And
So,
then our
Christian,
awareness becomes the expression of that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
so I have a question. So
Yes.
are there some people that have made that connection already there? Like when I think of Share International and Benjamin Crane, right?
Yeah.
He talks about Maitreya, the great teacher, and that he had this vision. Is it that some people have already connected and some of us haven't?
Some people in our evolutionary unfolding, some people have pieces of the puzzle that corresponded to that, and have more pieces, if you may. But in the totality of the puzzle, the Maitreya disappeared because it's not a person.
Right. That's what I
Maitreya
was
could
thinking.
never
How
be a
could
person.
someone
Christ
teach
could
if
never be
you
a
are?
person. Buddha can never be a person. Messiah can never be a person. Krishna can never be a person, because each of us is the personification of that as a larger existence than the myth. The myth is the idea that you are separated for that thing that innocently was proclaiming, or whatever it was, as being the thing itself. Yes, so in reality, Maitreya was inside of the idea of healing.
Healing. Okay.
Remember the idea of healing. Remember that I told you before that in the 70s, when I was very much involved in understanding consciousness, there was this man that you just called it. That what was the name that the man that you just said?
Benjamin Crane.
Benjamin Crane.
Yeah.
Benjamin Crane was a man in the 70s that said that in England he already was in the presence of the Maitreya, and he was preparing the Maitreya to come forward and be with Oprah and be in television and tell everybody is safe. Crazy, you know? Can you imagine the Maitreya walking in veils in the middle of 42nd Street, and I said, "You're healed." You know, it would be the ultimate nightmare. So the reason was because we innocently, as humans, we interpreted that Christ was really actually Christ as a person. It was Christ as a person, of course, but it was the embodiment of a consciousness and energy that was universal, and that we were all aware. We were not disciples of that energy. We were ourselves. That's what is great. Christ said, you can only come through the Father through me. But everybody interpreted that they have to come through the Father through Christ. What he was saying, you are the only one who can connect to the Father, and you are the kingdom of heaven. But in that time, you know, it was complex because the consciousness could never understand that.
So
But
we
anyway,
we are the vessels.
exactly,
This is it.
exactly. You can never be, once you enter the consciousness, you can never be more than other beings. If you really think that you are superior in any degree, you are inferior.
Yes.
Because you have separated the whole context of your mind, and then your experience comes into correspondence with the complexity that exists inside of that vision. Life is a mirror reflection. So once you understand that you are who you are, and actually you are God, you are all of it. You know, you're more than anything that you could ever imagine, because you are not subject to the interpretation of the myth.
So our only barrier is ourselves.
You are more than you could ever imagine, because you are not subject to the interpretation to the gradation or interpretation of the myth. Yeah. So that's what allows yourself to come into the presence of life, because your mind has finally become free of the measurements that you have created in your consciousness out of the story of your own humanity.
So as I'm hearing it, the only barrier is myself.
It always has been. That's once you
Anita tells me that all the time.
You understand that it always has been you. And then once you understand that always has been you, you can divest yourself very quickly, many projections, because every time that you divest yourself of any projection of your innocent, because it was all innocent. The ego was an innocent byproduct of the linear mind. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. You can't have a linear mind and have a self. The linear mind only exists inside of the realms of egoic awareness, and egoic awareness only exists inside of evolution. It was the natural existence of our evolving self. But when I became the self, then the ego disappeared, because the ego is very puny inside of his senses, because it's all contracted inside of his ideas and beliefs. But the self, since it is everything, have access to all possibilities of awareness, and all possibilities of awareness are so fantastic. In relation to crown will be light. Can you imagine light being the prism from which you see everything? Fantastic, the Garden of Eden. Yeah. Consciousness being the whole field in which your mind is connected to the intelligence that is the universe. Unity being the spirit of life, finally being free from having to push human to get to it, and be in the celebration of the union of the Trinity, because when we get to unity, as we said, the spirit had an enormous amount of work to do in evolution. So anyway, and then the fourth dimension became present in the now, which means that the moment becomes all self-contained. It becomes the moment of your existence. It's a big deal. And balance and beauty, and you know, I can go through all of them, because it represents an extraordinary awakening, but maybe not awakening, but I can use the word awakening. Extraordinary awakening of the whole context of your mind, from which you will see everything that you see from a new perspective, from the perspective of creation as renewal and perfection and beauty, instead of from the perspective of the observer. Yes, the observer watches, denominates, categorizes, like this, and I like it, and not that little blue is going to be much better. The sun is not good today because it's cloudy. I don't feel that good today. I don't, you know, it has thousands of ideas, the degrees of that. But the self doesn't feel that way. The self and you understand that the sun is always shining, everything is perfect. It's only you who want to create it. It's not good. And why would you do that? You know, might as well open the doors to everything, so everything can come to you, instead of saying, oh no, that not. You know, when you say, oh no, that no, that means you went back into the cage. One context of the mind got enclosed. But anyway, so it was a question.
Yes,
yes,
Christian, can you hear me?
yes, I hear you.
I'm graduating to an iPad, but my question,
Yes,
okay, so we're in the light, we are
yes,
becoming the light, we are the light.
yes.
Where does the body and illness come into play and working to prevent illness or
It's a very
something?
complex, it's a very complex the thing that you're just asking, because it's a very convoluted inside of the story of our humanity, because the body in some degree has become an object within ourselves. And when it becomes an object within ourselves, and the body innocently is not connected to life because the consciousness is not present, the body have to deal within itself constantly, and it deals constantly in a state of compensation. So when you get with the body innocently deals in state of compensation, the only way to get you to the surface is to be sick. You have to attend me, come on, do something. So it's complex, that conversation, because it can become very dualistic in blind, because then it can become a judgment. So I will say more that all aspects of sickness can become resolved more and more as we become more and more alive through the consciousness, through the energy, and through our presence. Because when we become present and become consciously aware, and we become sensorially in the energy of love, life changes. Because when you start eating something, you say, oh, I don't want to eat this. I don't want to do this. So you will not be able to continue to do things that innocently disconnect you from the moment of life. And in the moment that you do that, you becoming healthy, because the system finally is being present with you instead of trying to figure it out what it can do by itself. All things in compensation eventually destroy themselves, because in reality itself, it doesn't have any compensation. It only has unity. Yeah. So that question is a very important question, and someday we'll have it larger, but it requires more time, because we have to guide the mind to each of us, so not enter the realms of judgment, because we would like the reason people are sick, blah, 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 blah. But it's not. The best in that sense is to recognize that the moment of existence, the moment of perfection, the moment of unity, the moment of love, the moment of balance, the moment of beauty, the moment of self, the moment of nature, the moment of regeneration, the moment of foundation paradise, all sickness is beginning to dissolve, because we are becoming present with the reality the reality that really inundates us, embraces us with life energy. So less likely that you'll be sick. But so when you find somebody that is sick in any degree, you can be with them and help them. Love is the main thing, is to help them in any degree. And then if you can say, okay, you can lose weight, but you cannot say that because it's going, oh my God, I gotta lose. But you can just begin to really create lobotomies in people's minds in the best sense of the word. What that means is that you can go to their brain and change their brain. Why not? Just telling, the brain, it's going to happen in sleep in the middle of the night. You're going to say, oh, I'm not supposed to eat much cake right now today. I'm going to eat a little piece of cake instead of the whole thing. Because if you ask them to do it, it's going to be complex. They're going to say, oh, no. Or they're going to think, oh, never have cake again. I never do this again. And then you enter the mind that is holding, and then you do the same thing that eating all the cake. Yeah, it's so delicate. You understand how delicate it is? Because the mind wants to contract in righteousness. Oh, no, never. I never do that. And then when you do that, you went to the other side of the very thing that you had before. So it's complex, but that's a complex, because humanity, in our humanity, we always want to go to the opposite pole of the thing that we'd like to change. And we perhaps don't know yet that opposite pole exists inside of a trinity. So the middle is not the balance between the two. It's actually the connection to the fourth dimension, which is the moment of life. But it was difficult in consciousness and in evolutionary consciousness, because we always think that we have to attain a balance between opposites. That is all crazy. You can never get balance between opposites, because you'll always be playing hide and seek, and every time that you play in hide and seek, you have no access to the reality itself, which is actually the fulfillment of 3 dimensions and 4th dimensions. So balance is actually what balance is another one of the dimensions that correspond to the 10 dimensions, but it's not linear. It's the existence of its own self. And balance is your instantaneously atomic connection with all things. It's the moment in which you live an immanent reality. You are the connection to all things. That's what balance means. It doesn't mean not too much of this, not too much of that. That's the way we did it in evolution, because we were pursuing to trying to figure out some equanimity in the world, because everything was the opposites, the extremes of the opposite. I eat too much, today I'm not eating. I love you, but right now I don't feel it, I hate you. I do this and I do that. And then I try to be good. Every time that you're trying to be good, you're distorting because you think it's a behavior. Goodness is not a behavior. Goodness is the natural imprint of your consciousness. All attributes are not attributes of linear consciousness, are attributes of the natural nature of your being, which is the field of unity of consciousness. Yeah, it doesn't have any story like that. It don't exist. So anyway, so then, do you understand? Then what we call mind is the development of our linear consciousness that culminated itself in the moment of union, and then the mind reconnected with consciousness. So the consciousness of the garden, or the consciousness of the whole Darwinian theory, became one. So we are inside of the realm of consciousness. Yes? Do you understand a little bit what I'm saying? They need to go, it's okay? Yeah? So I would like to go through the graphics now a little bit, because I have through the graphics that we did before. Yes, so then we can explain. So this is the graphic what we're doing, right? The first three, the triad, yeah, crown, consciousness, of unity. And what I'm telling you right now is the crown. They are simultaneous. Crown is light, and it has many connotations inside of our human experience, inside also of the universal experience. And then consciousness is actually the union between mind and consciousness, because consciousness has been a mystery through our evolutionary self. People don't know what consciousness is, never knew, they couldn't define it. So consciousness is nothing other than the actual connection to the whole field, which always existed and it will always exist. And consciousness was the Garden of Eden, or the force that propelled the evolutionary consciousness of Darwinian theory, and it represents the whole field of consciousness that is actually the human experience. Yeah. So remember. So then that's the reason that unity in motion, when we express the union of the Trinity, the union of the first triad and the third eye, the union of the three triad as it is one, because the three aspects is the one, we call it whole awareness, the whole mind of life, which will be the same of saying the whole spectrum of awareness, they correspond as whole mind with the whole field of consciousness. So another way to say, we could say the whole awareness, our connection to universe, to consciousness, but then it creates a gap again. So we just keep it as mind, because now that we are united, we can understand that the linear mind has become whole, and the wholeness have connected to consciousness. So right now, in the new consciousness, we are the consciousness of unity reconnected with the Trinity of life. The consciousness being the Son. Remember the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Father is the light of the world, the intelligence of all things. And consciousness was the Son, Christ, the man, human, Adam. The Son is the archetypal nature of our human consciousness, trying desperately or consciously and unconsciously or desirable or spiritual or whatever way, trying to regain awareness and understanding of how we return back to the Father's love, which is the original Garden of Eden, or the original image and the likeness, in which each of us is the image and the likeness of God. Supreme intelligence, supreme love, supreme presence. Yes, I'm sorry, Lan.
So in terms of the person, in terms of me as the god or goddess or whatever. It is me connecting to my heart. It is me connecting myself to my heart.
Yes.
That is the ultimate consciousness. Yeah.
Yes. It's complex that, and again, it will take us an hour to really get back in the detail of that one. Love is, in reality, love is the free senses of the self. It is complete understanding of consciousness. It's complete feeling, which is the energy of love, and it's complete presence as a human experience. So we are not talking about, I think that what you're talking about is a love that encompasses all things. If that's what you're saying, is yes. But it's also important to recognize that when you're talking about the love that encompasses all things, you're talking about the intelligence that understands all things, the love, the energy that is the life itself, and then the present moment that is the present with the field of love. Because if you have to define the present moment of the universal existence, which is the fountain of life, is that the moment of universal existence is inside of a natural momentum that is merging the universe into its creative experience of infinity. The universe is a creative experience of God. So in that existence, love is the ever-present reality of creation. It's not just the feeling of creation. It's the ever-present reality of creation. And therefore, love is absolute intelligence, absolute feeling, and absolute presence. And then inside of that, you can say, love is all there is, and I can feel love. But it's good, because the reason that I say that, because in our human evolution became very complex, because when we began to understand in evolution that the mind was very complex, and the mind was very heady, and was disconnecting us from the reality itself through our evolution, many of us renounced the mind. So we decided to be only in our heart. And some of us decided to renounce the mind, renounce the heart, and it became very pragmatic, which means become totally physical in the physical world. All there is now, and I do the best I can, and I survive, and I go forward, and then that's it. I say goodbye. So each of us, we created a reality. So some of us became saints in the human consciousness because we knew that it was all love. Some of us became the ultimate professors, the ultimate physicists, the ultimate philosophers, because we understood that love got interpreted inside of the mind. Yeah, and other ones, love got interpreted inside of the physical experience. I like to eat this, I like to eat it, I like this table, I like this flower, I like to make love, I want to swim in the consciousness, I want the river, I want to go into the mountains, I want to play karate and kill you in the moment because I'm stronger than you are. So it became the physical existence. And so it's important for you to understand, because otherwise it's innocent. When you start saying love, 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 it's good. But the new consciousness needs to understand, doesn't need to be understand, wrong word. The new consciousness understands that love is really actually intelligence, consciousness. And the love is actually the physical moment of our life. And then love is the natural feeling of life. Then you got it. But if you think that love is all there is, and love is all there is, and mine is blah, 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 and then you innocently compartmentalize your mind again, and you create a trinity of separation inside of your mind, and then everything becomes complex, because then you're back in the linear process, which is all right, because eventually you'll get out of it, because the consciousness is going to take you out. Disregarding if you're not or not, it's going to get you by your hairs and take you out, because now the consciousness is the master. You are no longer relative to relation to your own doing. You are inside of the field of consciousness. Yeah. So anyway, so then I would like to go, if it's possible, to the first graphic, which is that the whole field of consciousness. Yeah. So the best way to understand mind and the whole mind of consciousness is to understand mind as a sphere, and then made of tetrahedrons. This sphere has 100 tetrahedrons. And the 100 tetrahedrons represent realities of consciousness existing within the 10 dimensions. not to confuse you, since each of the dimensions self-contain the other 9 and is real because of the unity of the 3, when you have the totality of all the spectrum of consciousness that existed in the whole mind, you have 100 tetrahedrons making up the sphere. And each of the tetrahedrons is an informative aspect of your mind that it gives synergy to all of your 5 senses. Yes, each of the tetrahedrons. So in evolution, when we enter evolution, you are in the second graphic, which is this one, which is evolution was inside of its own self-containment. We were self-contained inside of the human experience of life. The best way to understand it, searching for the reality of that, the self-enclosure of consciousness, searching for the reality of life. So if you were to define the separation from the garden or the evolutionary of the species, you can say we entered the realm of consciousness by beginning to define the realms of mind. But we were self-enclosed inside of a system called planet Earth and inside of a system called human beings. The human being in the creation of universal existence is a God, because it's the only creature in the entire universe and maybe in the entire human existence that it can find its union to his God through self-experience. It's the only creature, since it was created in the image and the likeness, can be the whole pieces of the puzzle that understand God to be the nature of your life. The rest of the universe, or as it was, or in the nature, is just following the natural impulse of being one with God already, but it didn't have the consciousness or the feeling or the reality that can put together the puzzle as a self-aware existence. So if you think of yourself as an experiment, we were the experiment of evolutionary consciousness, returning creation through our own volition by being again, once again with the garden and once again with God, in which your mind became actually the brilliancy from which you were created to be in the brilliancy you are. So in evolutionary consciousness then, the unfolding of duality, everything unfolding into light and darkness, I like it, I don't like it, good and evil, I adore you, but not today, I like to eat, but I shouldn't eat, I am beautiful, but today I not feel beautiful, maybe if I do this, I'm sick, but I don't know what is happening. So we created an extraordinary scenario of consciousness that it became very complex, that we have been. That's the scenario of consciousness that manifested the different countries, the different humanity are either part of the consciousness that manifested all the different civilizations and so forth. So we were each of those tetrahedron was mirroring another relationship that corresponded to the individualized polarity. Yes, so each of the tetrahedron corresponded to another polarity. This is a simplistic way for you to understand how it happened and how the mind became whole consciousness. Yeah, because it's just an image to it. So when everything finally became in 1986, what happens is that for the first time in 1986, all the scenario of consciousness became fulfilled. And I suspected that one of the last, perhaps, this is my suspicion, that it was quantum entanglement. That science, because remember that the spiritual world was very evolved and exquisitely beautiful, but it was self-enclosed inside of its own hierarchy. So the spiritual world can never manifest the renewal of the consciousness, because by that time have already inside of its own design. It was inside of the lineage of time. So once the lineage of time became crystallized as form, it was very difficult to release it. The lineage of time, as it is released from from, just to give you some example, without separation, as it was religion in the Catholic Church, it became this extraordinary, beautiful experience of cathedrals that the self-enclosed, they are made inside of perfect proportions and so forth, but it's still directed by men that they are ancient inside of their mind, thinking that Christ is all there is, without bypassing innocently the actual teaching, which is the kingdom of heaven isn't here, and Christ was a celebration of life. It wasn't the celebration of the death of the Son forever. So inside of that, that's what happened. Inside of Messiah was the whole idea that Messiah having to be a new consciousness. He could never be born of a human, because already the consciousness said that the woman can never really manifest a child that it will be pure. So the consciousness inside of self, you can only make the most people who are the most evolved inside, students of that consciousness can only make love to a woman inside through a sheet, a hole in the sheet, because the woman is impure. So it's innocent, but that was the way created. Yeah, Buddha created the Dharma, which is extraordinary things that you go through in order to purify your senses. Islam, which was the last religion of human experience, was really based in geometry and unity. But look what happened, innocent in Islam. We are in war with Islam, the infidels coming to get your head, doing all those things. Crazy, absolutely crazy. So all the religions could never really manifest the release of the consciousness, because the formation that have taken thousands and thousands of years have crystallized itself in a form that it could never give a space to the renewal. The all could never be renewal because it manifested so much. It was innocent because the spiritual planes thought that that would be the only way to preserve the knowledge and to preserve the spirit, is to crystallize it in some degree of form in terms of teaching, or in terms of symbols, in terms of statues, in terms of candles, and many, many things that they were very beautiful, but they were all self-contained. So when consciousness became fulfilled in the first time, the best way to acknowledge this, if you think that each tetrahedron inside of the sphere is a mirror. So for the first time, you have all points within the sphere as a mirror reflecting a center. Because before, in the other one, you couldn't reflect the center. This one could never reflect the center. You could only reflect the polarity, the corresponding polarity, and the search for the balance, which was the search for the center. Yeah. And this one, for the first time, the center appeared. And when the center appeared, the self, for the first time, have full spectrum of consciousness, because the internal reflected the external, and the external reflected the internal. It became one. And when it became one, the internal and the external became simultaneously one. So what happens is that the self in us, for the first time, became free from the egoic idea, because finally we were home. And each of us then, as a self, became the renewal of the race of men, and the renewal that correspond to universal existence. We became cosmic, truly cosmic for the first time. Because before, we used cosmic consciousness and many, many things, but they were all images, perfect images, but they were images that they were not really crystallized as the reality itself. So we became, for the first time, cosmic, because the boundaries that contained our mind became dissolved. And then, so therefore, the moment of life, as it was self-contained, and it was the first time was centralized as the self, when it became self-contained, dissolved, for the first time, dissolved the confinement. And the confinement exploded. The actual self-enclosed of our experience at earthy becomes self-enclosed into thousands of pieces. And the wheel of karma, which was the self-enclosed, where we said that we come in and go in, and in each time we have to revive our consciousness because we have to purify the consciousness, which in some degree was true, but only it was true inside of that consciousness that it was already judged. The new consciousness could never have that. So the wheel of karma dissolves into thousands of pieces, dissolve it. It means that we have a new start. You're free from the old mind forever. And therefore, the implosion explosion released the boundaries of time. So time, as it was, instead of being a crystallization that condemn us or to imprison us in the planet Earth, became the frame of time that it was connected to the timeless. So we were for the first time inside of the timeless moment, or what we call the eternal moment, inside of the field. First time inside of the field. And inside of the field, we had then for the first time access to the whole past, to the whole future, and the present now as one, the Trinity. The whole projection of future, the whole experience of past, because the future is the universe. It's all self-contained. It's not linear. And the present now, it was like two sets of what is it called when things like in the bicycle, when you have things that merge in the bicycle, that it goes like that. What was the name? Do you know? I can't remember.
Gears.
Gears. Those two sets of gears, the past and the future, became interconnected, and the union between the gears became the moment itself, becomes the eternal moment. And the eternal moment became this, the flower of life, or the geometry of balance, or the fountain of life. Became the moment that coordinate us, unified us, make us instantaneous, made us simultaneous with synchronicity itself, which is we were synchronized with God, which is the same as saying synchronized with the universal consciousness, and the same as saying with the actual physical experience of the universe. And then the flower that you see right here, it will be the top crown. If you see it from here, from the front, you think it's the center of the flower. If you see it from the whole perspective, this is crown. This is the moment in which the flower opens itself, and which the lotus flower, it was called the lotus flower, remember in all the traditions, the lotus flower, what really was always, was nothing other, the flower that never ceases to open. It is the moment of life itself. But in that time, we only understood it in certain aspects of consciousness. We didn't know that we were the flower itself. The third eye, the opening of the third eye, is nothing other than the release of the mind to be able to understand itself instead of the forever ending flower, that every single petal becomes another moment. But the moment of the petal of the crown is actually the fountain of life. So it's always recreating itself anew as a renewal of what we call universe. So it's not self-enclosed. It is totally united as one system, but it's always renewing, yes? So the moment movement of life, the eternal reality of life. So this is what the sphere of life above is. This is right here, if you see it from above, if you look into, you will see the 7 centers of the sphere, the other side of the sphere, right? Yeah, this point here, right here, is the 7 center. This is crown. And inside of this is the geometry of 3 dimensions, is the sphere of life. So for the first time,
Bring it up a little bit.
yeah, right here, yeah. So once you begin to see it, you understand that this line, when you see it from the front, may see the center of the sphere. But if you pass through the center of the sphere and go through the dimension, not just the flat, you will see the 7 centers connecting to the other half, to the other side of the sphere itself. This will be the top, yeah? Or here you can see this is the bottom, this is the top, and this is the center. But if you see it in 3 dimensions, if you see the center from the top, you will see the 7 centers going through, because you will see it from that up down, yeah? It's important to see it. I'm confusing you with this a little bit. No, you can see it. It's good. Once your mind understands that, you're piercing the linear mode of your mind that wants to see everything like a fried egg without understanding that everything has dimension. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. So for the first time, we get in time, is the new consciousness of life came into existence. This is what it is. So the planet Earth, the new consciousness of life, the planet Earth became for the first time also consciously through our humanity reconnected consciously to the solar system. It always was because it persisted, but for the first time became conscious, completely conscious of its connection to everything. So it became the celestial sphere of the motherland. And that's the reason that we're going through all this about repairing the planet and global warming and everything, because we have vandalized it innocently, the motherland, because we thought that we needed to exploit it in order to survive. We didn't know that every time that we exploiting innocently the motherland, taking all the oil, taking everything, and the pollution doesn't care, it's all about money, we become more sick and more sick and more sick, because we were separating the content of our wholeness in the thought that we needed to survive, when in reality, we were always in the motherland, in the arms of the motherland. So the 10 dimensions made of hearts, it means the whole energy of love. And then the geometry of balance became the reinstatement that allow every celestial body to exist inside of his movement. And it became actually the reinstatement of geometrical harmony. So we are inside of the geometrical harmony that we call life, the geometrical harmony that we call absolute geometry, intelligence, perfect proportions, that already were existing. Remember, the Islamic people have the understanding of perfect proportion, the geometry of life. The church, through Christ, by taking us into the heavens and our consciousness, created all the proportions that we created all the churches, the beautiful proportions. Yeah. So everything became available now, but it's good to understand it as being a reflection of the natural existence of our self. So we begin to understand more and more and more the meaning of our communion with life itself, and then the 10 dimensions of life. Okay, so today we just went to crown. We were to crown a little bit, because I told you crown eventually, once we go through the 10 dimensions, and I'll guide you through the 10 dimensions, and you understand the meaning of the 10 dimensions, you will understand really the meaning of crown then. Because then the mind will have a whole perspective to understand what you're beginning to comprehend now about crown and the meaning of each of the dimensions, because then each dimension has a depth of understanding that is self-contained in its own individuality and is self-contained in its own wholeness. So today we did crown and we did consciousness, and we clarify a little bit, and I hope that you can text me or call me or write about the meaning between mind and consciousness. That consciousness means that mind means whole awareness and whole mind. And by whole awareness and whole mind, we are inside of the field of consciousness again. So we are inside of the garden, we're inside of the full evolution of consciousness. And full evolution of consciousness doesn't mean that you, or human, doesn't mean that you stop to being creative. On the contrary, this is the first time that you really become creative. Because in evolution, we'll repeat everything over and over and over. Groundhog Day forever. That's what been evolution. In order to get us finally. And the new consciousness, we know Groundhog Day is already forever out. We are in the spring. Yeah. So then next time, unfortunately, I didn't get to the spirit, which is the third dimension. But next time I will get to the third dimension, unity and the spirit, and hopefully to the fourth dimension. Yeah, because once we understand crown, consciousness, and unity as the unity of the trinity of life, for the first time, then we understand the whole content of our mind. And then the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8 is the treasure that our mind self-contains within itself. The treasure of the mind self-contained within itself is magical, because it assisted to understand and be in the garden. We saw everything and we experienced everything, but we didn't know what it was because we didn't have a mind. But now we have a full mind. So can you imagine the garden becomes magical, because not only it is the magic of what it is, but it's self-informative. It informs me completely. And it gives you all the treasures, what are the colors, and what the shades, and what does it mean, and what's the perfume, and what's the dust, and what does it mean to you? What is the gift that the flowers for you? Because the entire creation, the entire universe was created for only one purpose, for you to be able to experience the wondrous nature of your existence as a human existence. God, since you are the God. God doesn't exist without you. You are the manifestation, the natural reflection. So the natural celebration of the glory of God is actually the natural celebration of you. God doesn't need celebration of glory. It will be like a dorky. If God will need celebration of glories, it will be might as well be the ultimate dorky. So only the human can really experience the glory of God, because God is the glory. You don't need to experience the glory. Yeah, God is not waiting for you to really give him treasures, because everything is of God. He doesn't have anything. He doesn't have anything to receive. You understand? Everything is. So it has all the treasures. So every time that you're trying to give it a treasure, it's okay, because you get some points in yourself. But in reality, it's all for you, because you get yourself. So anyway, I'm sorry I went a little bit longer today, but I needed to finish that at least. But I think that we did well. I think that we're doing great, because I sense that you are, it's a lot what I'm saying, but I sense that it's permeating your consciousness. And it's lovely, because we can get more and more access to the treasures that our mind was created as the ultimate treasure, that it says, your wish is my command. It's the ultimate Siri. The mind was created as the ultimate Siri. But the mind existed inside of consciousness, because inside of the random mind, you will be crazy, because innocently you will create all kinds of things that may innocently not be perfect, because you will be superimposing things to another human being. The real mind, it never harms anything. It's 100% benign, because it's 100% love. Yeah. All right. I love you. Have fun. I love it. And we'll continue next time. But don't forget to really text, call, tell us, Carolina and I and all of us, that we love each other continuously, because love is all there is. Might as well do it. You know? Okay. I love you. Have fun. Ciao, ciao. Okay. Ciao. All right. I cancel. I don't know. Share screen. What should I supposed to do? Chat participant. Leave.
Just
Stop
leaving.
share. Just
Yes, all
stop
right.
share.
Leaving meeting. Thank